In this video, I want to show you one of my favorite rail trails in the whole state. I recently made a video about my favorite long ride inside New York City, but there's even better riding to be had in the suburbs up north. Whenever I have a little more time, I like to head out and ride some of the awesome rail trails within commuter distance of New York City, and this one may be the nicest of them all. Rail trails are long cycling and pedestrian lanes that run along the remains of old railroads that have been discontinued. They typically offer dozens of miles of pleasant riding separated from traffic and surrounded by trees and nature. For many of them, that is about all they offer, but the one I want to highlight in this video has a lot more to discover. It is called the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail in Ulster County, New York. It's not necessarily one of the longest rail trails, but is full of historical sites, scenic bridges, fascinating geological formations, and wonderful countryside views. Even though it's just a few hours on the train from the city, it passes through some of the most scenic parts of the state. Stay tuned and I'll show you some of what makes this one of my favorite places to bike. The Wallkill Valley Rail Trail is not particularly long. It is officially only 22 miles, but there's another portion of trail that roughly connects to it to the south, so if you ride the longest version of it from Walden into downtown Kingston, you'll be looking at just a little under 30 miles. But this trail is not so much about quantity, but the quality of the miles. I actually talked about this trail in my previous video about my short tour through the Hudson Valley a few years ago, but it's such an awesome place to bike that I felt it deserved a video all to itself. The surface is largely unpaved but firm and easy to ride without needing exceptionally chonky tires. I've ridden the trail in all seasons, including several times after heavy rains, and found it drains really well with very little mud or standing water to slow me down. It passes right along the Wallkill River Valley at the foot of the Shawangunk Ridge, which is a largely wild nature area dominated by Minnewaska State Park and the Mohonk Preserve. I've got a couple of videos about Minnewaska if you want to learn more about those. Much of the surroundings are rural, but there's plenty of small towns along the trail to get food, water, and other basic supplies. The largest town along the way is New Paltz, a bustling college town with a compact downtown full of restaurants, bars, and anything else you may need, including a bike shop. The trail passes several historical sites and points of interest on the way north out of New Paltz. The first of which is still inside city limits, and it's called Historic Huguenot Street. It's a small residential neighborhood that features several stone buildings dating back to the beginning of the 1700s. There is also an old 18th century church and a small museum on premises. Historic Huguenot Street is located right next to the rail trail and is well worth a tiny detour. I'll include it in the GPX file. Less than a mile further down, the trail passes over the Wallkill River across a small rail bridge just before Springtown Road. This bridge is not very high above the river, and the water down below is usually very still. The Springtown Bridge was used as the setting for a famous movie from 2018 that many of you might recognize. I won't leave any spoilers here, but I will point out that a kind of tribute to the movie was left hanging from the top of the bridge at one end. It's a quiet place to spend a little time before carrying on riding. The following stretch of trail is very green and passes a few farms with occasional glimpses of the Shawangunk Mountains, specifically the rocky hill known as Bonteku Crag. There's an artist community called Stone Mountain Farm that sits along the rail trail just before the town of Rosendale. They offer a few services including bike rentals, camping, options to stay overnight, and they also operate the Rail Trail Cafe right next to the path of the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail. They are open seasonally, typically Thursday through Sunday, and sell beverages, pizza from a wood-fired oven, and often have music performances on warm weekends. One of the trail's most iconic features is just past the cafe on the outskirts of Rosendale. This section of trail passes over the Rosendale Trestle, a 940-foot tall rail bridge above the Roundout Creek. The Wallkill Valley Railroad first built the trestle in 1872, and it carried trains for over 100 years until 1977 when Conrail, the then owner, shut the rail line down for good. When I first rode it over a decade ago, the surface, which was redone a few years prior, was still quite smooth. It was made out of a wood-plastic composite that has since warped and is now quite bumpy. The trestle has great views of the creek and a small church next to one of the small river crossings down below. It's a unique place to get to ride a bike, and in my opinion worth the trip by itself. The north side of the bridge connects to Joppenberg Mountain, an imposing hill covered in boulders. There had been cement mines here over a century ago before they collapsed in 1899. The town of Rosendale is relatively small, but there is plenty to do in and around it. There are two separate hiking trails beginning here. The Lime Kiln Trail starts right off the rail trail and climbs a short distance to an overlook spot. This is the northern end of the trail network that leads out of the Mohonk Preserve, so it's possible to connect to more trails and hike all throughout the Shawangunk Ridge. Another short but scenic trail starts in the parking lot in downtown Rosendale and climbs to the top of Joppenberg Mountain. The hike is short but vertical and ends with wonderful views of the trestle. There are even more interesting sites immediately north of the trestle and Joppenberg Mountain. Here there's a system of caves where limestone was dug for many decades. The trail and the surrounding areas are full of remains of old kilns where limestone was burned to make cement. The cement produced here was used to build the Brooklyn Bridge, the pedestal the Statue of Liberty stands on, and many more significant monuments. These caves are quite deep, and the air coming out of them is consistently the same temperature. In the summer, this air feels like powerful air conditioning and is a godsend on hot days. About a mile detour from this part of the trail is a stunning place called Widow Jane Mine. It is a flooded mine with an enormous chamber that features unique acoustics and frequently hosts musical events. It's free to visit during opening hours, just don't expect to have any cell reception on the inside. There are several more mine and kiln remains along the Wallkill Valley before the trail ends just outside of the town of Kingston. Kingston is by far the biggest city along the trail and was New York's first capital before Albany back in 1777. It's full of old historic buildings and features the only intersection in the United States where all four corner buildings were built before the Revolution. It has a wonderful food scene, some excellent breweries, and nice waterfront district with even more to discover. There is a small lighthouse visible from the park on the Kingston waterfront. It sits where the Rondout Creek meets the Hudson River and is one of the 7 historic lighthouses still left standing on the Hudson River. The current version was built in 1915 and features on the National Register of Historic Places. It's best observed from the water, or like I did from the sky. Running alongside so many preserved natural areas, the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail naturally attracts a number of critters. I've seen many typical animals like chipmunks, garter snakes, and rabbits, but I once saw something in the weasel family, like maybe a stoat or something, near the Springtown Bridge, though I didn't get a photo of it. I also encountered this guy. It wasn't technically along the trail, but was only a few miles away, and might have been the cutest animal encounter I've ever had, so I had to include it in this video. Don't be surprised if you encounter some wildlife riding along this trail. Getting to the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail isn't super complicated, but it can make for a long day if you're trying to ride it from New York City. There are a couple of different ways to get there by commuter trains. If you want to ride the entirety of it from the town of Walden, an option is to take the Port Jarvis, New Jersey Transit line out of Hoboken, or Penn Station with a transfer in Secaucus, to the stop of Salisbury Mills. You will cross the top of the famous Moodna Viaduct, which was also a setting for a pivotal scene in a Hollywood movie. From the Salisbury Mills stop, it is about a 10-mile ride to the town of Walden and the beginning of the trail that becomes the Wallkill Valley. I did this the first time I rode it, and we spent the night in Kingston, then rode the O&W Rail Trail back to New Paltz the following day before connecting with the second option. Option 2 is to take Metro-North's Hudson Line to Poughkeepsie, cross the walkway over the Hudson, the world's longest elevated pedestrian bridge, to the town of Highland on the other side. From here, the Hudson Valley Rail Trail runs about 10 miles to New Paltz and joins the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail in the middle. It's also possible to take Amtrak in Rhinecliff, which is across the river from Kingston, but this option is much more expensive than relying on commuter trains. I've never tried to take a bike on a bus to the Hudson Valley, but loads of bus lines serve this area with a wide variety of different and often unfriendly rules surrounding carrying bikes. There are so many more great trails and roads to ride in the Hudson Valley. It really is one of the nicest places to ride a bike near New York City. Check out my other videos of rail trails in this area, including the Maybrook Trail, one of the newest and most remote rail trails in the state. I have a playlist full of videos about rides inside and just outside New York City, so check them out as well. Leave a comment if you've ridden the Wallkill Valley and what your impressions were. Send me other rail trail recommendations or other topics as well. I've got a backlog of videos to make, but always looking for new ideas. Thanks for watching.